Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. Gulliver ends up preferring the sound of horses neighing to, well, talking with his own family.
Yeah, it's quite the starting point, isn't it? That detail comes from Swift's letter to his cousin Simpson, right at the beginning of the edition we're looking at.
Exactly. And it's incredibly unsettling. It just hangs there, hinting at this really profound, maybe even damaging journey he's been on before we even start Voyage I.
It completely frames how you read what follows. Swift's basically telling us up front, this guy gets seriously disillusioned.
Right. And that's our goal here, isn't it? To unpack that journey. We're digging into these excerpts from the Oxford World's Classics edition. We've got the introduction, that revealing letter from Swift, and key bits from all four voyages.
Think of it as a kind of guided tour through the highlights, pulling out the main ideas and maybe some surprising details from Swift's classic.
We've got a good mix of perspectives, too. Swift's own voice in the letter, then the critical lens from the introduction, and of course, Gulliver's narrative itself.
And starting with that letter is such a clever move by Swift.
It really is. You meet the cynical, almost misanthropic Gulliver before you meet the seemingly naive guy who washes ashore in Lilliput.
It sets up this immediate sense of dramatic irony, like the introduction points out. We know where he ends up, mentally, which makes his earlier experiences feel, well, different. You start looking for the cracks right away.
Okay, so let's jump into that first voyage. Shipwrecked, wakes up on a beach. What's the scene?
Well, he can't move at all. He's pinned down by hundreds, maybe thousands of tiny threads. Even his hair is tied down.
And then he sees them.
Yeah, these little figures, maybe 6 inches tall, swarming all over him. Can you imagine?
He lets out a roar, obviously, scares him off.
For a second. Then they come back, bold as brass, and one shouts, Hikina de Gaulle, like a little declaration.
It's almost funny the scale of it. This giant man, totally helpless against these tiny people.
That's a key insight right there, isn't it? Swift immediately plays with scale and power. Gulliver's strength means nothing against their sheer numbers and organization. They're not just scared, they're figuring out the logistics of dealing with him.
And they start feeding him. But the portions are just absurd.
Absurdly small. Meat like a lark's wing, loaves like musket bullets. He downs one of their hogsheads of wine like it's half a pint.
It really hammers home the size difference.
And even then, totally vulnerable, he admits he thinks about just grabbing a handful and crushing them.
But he doesn't.
No, he holds back, partly because they have shown him hospitality, feeding him, and not immediately attacking him more seriously. It shows a bit of his initial character, that moral restraint.
Then some official-type Lilliputian shows up.
Right, a high-ranking guy. Tells Gulliver they're taking him to the capital city, Mildendo. Gulliver tries to signal he wants freedom, but nope.
They just see him as... what?
A curiosity, a resource.
Pretty much. They're operating entirely within their own tiny frame of reference.
Yeah.
His desires don't really register. He's something to be managed.
The journey to Mildendo has that weird bit where he gets woken up.
Oh, yeah. The ridiculous accident. An officer pokes him in the nose with a half-pike.
Ouch. But ridiculous is the word. It just highlights the power dynamic again, and their kind of clumsy attempts to control this giant. It's got that touch of Swiftian absurdity.
And where do they put him up?
In this old abandoned temple, it's described as polluted. And the notes mention a possible link to the banqueting house at Whitehall, where Charles I was executed.
That adds a layer, doesn't it? Power, downfall. Even giants can be brought low.
Exactly. It subtly injects this historical resonance, hinting at the instability of power, regardless of scale.
Huge crowds come to gawk at him, apparently.
Absolutely. The emperor even has to issue proclamations to keep order. Gulliver's a sensation.
But he keeps a few things hidden, doesn't he? In his private pocket.
Yeah, his spectacles and a pocket telescope or perspective, he chooses not to reveal them.
Why do you think? Starting to be cautious?
I think so. Maybe realizing that not everything about him will seem harmless to them. A little bit of self-preservation kicking in.
Okay, let's talk about the Lilliputian court. The way they choose officials is memorable.
Oh, the rope dancing. Yeah, candidates for high office have to dance on this tightrope.
Mm.
Whoever jumps highest without falling gets the job. Flimnap, the treasurer, is apparently amazing at it.
It's such brilliant satire, isn't it?
Totally. Swift's just skewering the absurdity of political maneuvering, how status can depend on, superficial skills and putting on a show, rather than actual competence. Political theater, basically.
Gulliver eventually gets his freedom, but with strings attached. Lots of them.
A whole list of conditions. He has to help with building projects, survey the kingdom by pacing it out.
And his food allowance is enough for 1728 Lilliputians.
That number just jumps out, doesn't it? It shows how they see him,
Hmm.
primarily as this massive drain on resources. They're trying to quantify him, integrate him into their system.
And Mildendo, the capital. Sounds quite neat.
Very orderly, a perfect square, 500 feet aside, wide streets, capacity for 500,000 souls. It's like a miniature, perfectly planned city.
And maybe Swift's commenting on that human urge for order, even on a tiny scale.
Could be. Or maybe mocking the idea that such perfect order is even possible or desirable in a real society.
Some of their laws sound surprisingly good, like the one about informers.
Right. If you falsely accuse someone, you face a harsh punishment, and the person you accused gets quadruple damages. Seems pretty fair.
A real incentive for truth-telling.
It's Swift presenting a kind of utopian idea, perhaps contrasting it with the flaws he saw in European justice systems. Makes you think.
And then there's ingratitude being a capital crime, and the state raising kids in public nurseries.
Yeah, those really challenge our assumptions, don't they? He uses these alien customs to make us question our own norms about family, duty, education. Very effective.
But things sour for Gulliver, don't they? Politics gets involved.
Inevitably. There's a plot to starve him, or maybe blind him, and the Empress is furious with him.
Yes. The fire incident.
The fire incident. He puts out a fire in her palace apartments, using the quickest method available to someone of his size, which involves, well, urine.
Not exactly protocol.
Not exactly.
Mm.
And while it saved the palace, it was seen as a huge insult. The notes link it to Rabelais' Gargantua, who does something similar. It's crude, but it highlights the massive clash of perspectives and scales. His necessary action is seen as a grave offense.
So, facing starvation or blinding, what does he do?
He makes a run for it, a rash decision, as he calls it. He goes over to the enemy island, Blefuscu,
Ow.
basically wades and swims across the channel,
Yeah.
towing their navy behind him. Well, not quite, but he seizes one of their biggest warships. It's a display of his brute strength in that context.
And impulsive, like you said.
Definitely impulsive, acting decisively, maybe without thinking through all the consequences. A bit of a pattern for Gulliver.
Eventually, he gets back to England from Lilliput, but he doesn't stay long.
Nope. That insatiable desire of seeing foreign countries kicks in again. He leaves his wife and kids and heads back out to sea.
So the first voyage didn't cure his wanderlust at all.
Not a bit. It just whetted his appetite, it seems. He's fundamentally restless.
Which brings us to voyage 2, Brobdingnag.
And talk about a change of scenery. From being the giant to being tiny.
Suddenly, he's the 6-inch high creature in a land of, well, giants. The scale is reversed completely.
The shock must have been immense. Found by this huge farmer, the farmer's wife screaming at the sight of him. He's utterly vulnerable again, but in the opposite way.
And he becomes a kind of pet, right? For the farmer's daughter initially, then the queen buys him.
Yeah, he goes from being this powerful, if captured, figure in Lilliput to basically a court curiosity, a plaything, a major shift in status.
How does that affect him?
It has to chip away at his sense of self-importance. He's totally dependent, stripped of his physical advantage. It really forces him to confront his own smallness in the grand scheme of things.
And his perception of beauty changes too, based on size.
That's a fascinating point he makes. He thought the Lilliputians had the fairest complexions. But in Brobdingnag, looking closely at the Maids of Honor, he sees every flaw magnified. And a Brobdingnagian scholar examines his skin and finds it coarse.
So beauty is relative to size.
Exactly. A simple observation, but profound. Our judgments are totally shaped by our frame of reference, by scale.
He talks about the ignominy of being shown off like a monster, but he seems to kind of accept it.
He does seem to develop a certain resilience, or maybe just acceptance of his bizarre fate. He knows he's a stranger, completely out of place, and adapts as best he can.
The descriptions of travel there sound awful. Carried in a box, the horse taking 40-foot strides.
It just emphasizes his fragility and dependence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything is potentially perilous when you're that small. Mundane things become life-threatening.
And he even faces petty cruelty from the king's dwarf.
Yeah, the dwarf seems incredibly jealous and plays these nasty tricks, like stuffing him inside a marrowbone.
So malice exists regardless of size, it seems.
Swift's suggesting exactly that, I think.
Jeffrey.
Jealousies, despite these, aren't unique to humans of our scale. They're maybe just human, or at least common failings.
But the really significant part of Brobdingnag is his conversations with the king, right?
Absolutely. The king is fascinated by Gulliver's descriptions of Europe, especially England, but he approaches it with this detached, critical reason. He asks these incredibly probing questions.
About everything, the nobility, the courts, war, money.
Yeah, and his questions really expose the potential absurdity or corruption in European systems. He asks about lawyers arguing unjust causes, and the notes link this to Swift's own bad experiences with lawsuits.
Right, that chancery suit adds a personal edge.
It does. The king questions the treasury, taxes, why England needs a standing army in peacetime. He forces Gulliver and us to look at these institutions with fresh eyes without the usual assumptions.
And Gulliver's big mistake is trying to impress the king with gunpowder.
Oh, huge mistake.
Hmm.
He thinks he's offering this amazing technological gift, the secret to immense power.
And the king's reaction.
Utter horror. He's appalled by the sheer destructive potential and the immorality of inventing something designed solely to kill vast numbers of people. He calls Gulliver's kind the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth.
Wow, that's harsh.
It's incredibly damning. Through the king, Swift delivers this powerful critique of human violence and the misuse of ingenuity for destructive ends. Reason and morality are paramount for the king.
Interestingly, their own laws are supposedly very concise, no commentaries allowed.
Yeah, just the opposite of complex European legal codes. Swift seems to be advocating for simplicity and clarity, maybe suggesting that endless interpretation just muddies the waters and benefits lawyers.
Gulliver has that terrifying run-in with the monkey, too.
Another reminder of his vulnerability. This giant monkey treats him like a doll, stuffs food in his mouth, carries him up onto the roof. He's genuinely terrified for his life.
And the king finds it amusing.
Which just adds insult to injury for Gulliver. He tries to insist he was courageous, but it falls flat. Human pride looks pretty silly from a giant's perspective.
He does manage some small creative feats, though, like making furniture or that purse from the queen's hair.
Little sparks of human ingenuity, adapting to his circumstances, using the resources available, however strange.
And the music at court is just deafening for him.
Another sensory reminder of the scale difference. Something beautiful or enjoyable for them is just overwhelming noise for him.
So Brobdingnag really forces this radical shift in perspective. It's key to his growing disillusionment, isn't it?
Definitely. Seeing humanity through the eyes of these rational, moral giants exposes flaws he hadn't considered before. It's a huge step towards his final viewpoint.
Okay, from giants to a flying island. Where does Voyage 3 take him?
To Laputa. And yes, it's literally a flying island populated by people completely obsessed with abstract thought, mathematics, and music. But they're so absorbed in these theoretical pursuits that they're incredibly absent-minded about practical reality. They need servants, flappers, to gently hit them with bladders to remind them to speak or listen.
Oh, flappers. Seriously?
Seriously. The notes link it to the old story of Thales the philosopher falling into a well while looking at the stars. That kind of intellectual detachment from the real world.
And they're constantly worried about cosmic disasters.
Yeah, terrified the sun will swallow the earth or a comet will hit. It might be Swift mocking some contemporary scientific fears, like those related to Whiston's theories mentioned in the notes. It's like their intellect leads them to anxiety, not peace.
The island itself sounds like a feat of engineering. Adamantine base, lodestone controlling movement.
Swift uses the language of science and magnetism, maybe drawing on Whiston again, but pushes it into the realm of satire. Rational principles leading to this bizarre floating society.
And the king uses the island itself as a weapon.
A rather extreme form of control, yes. He can block the sun and rain from rebellious lands below, or even threaten to just drop the island on them. Talk about detached ruling.
But one town, Lindolino, actually resists.
They do. They build towers to potentially damage the island's base, forcing the king to back down. A nice touch of practical resistance against abstract tyranny.
And there's that lord at court who's respected despite being terrible at math and music.
A little jab at how status isn't always linked to the supposed values of a society. Favoritism exists even among the hyper-intellectual.
Then Gulliver goes down to Legato, below Laputa, and visits the Academy of Projectors. This sounds like pure satire central.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's Swift's brilliant takedown of impractical scientific research, likely aimed at institutions like the Royal Society.
What kind of projects are they working on?
Utterly useless and absurd things. Trying to extract sunbeams from cucumbers to bottle them. Trying to turn human excrement back into food. Building houses from the roof down. Softening marble for pillows. It's relentless.
Just completely divorced from common sense or utility.
Precisely. Swift's questioning the value of knowledge, pursued purely for its own sake, especially when it becomes ridiculous.
And the language project, communicating with objects.
Yeah, instead of using words, they propose carrying around all the objects they need to talk about, only opposed by women and the vulgar, apparently.
Another jab at intellectual elitism, maybe?
Seems likely. Dismissing practical concerns and the opinions of ordinary people in favor of some wildly impractical theory.
And the professors debating new taxes.
Taxing vices versus taxing qualities like beauty or courage. It's a cynical look at the often arbitrary and morally questionable ways governments try to raise money,
After that, he visits Glubdubdrib, the island of sorcerers.
where he gets to summon the dead. Quite a perk. He chats with historical figures like Caesar, Hannibal, Pompey, the Roman Senate.
What's the point of that? To show how great the past was.
Not exactly. It allows Swift, through Gulliver, to question the standard historical narratives. He finds out the great men often had less than noble motives, and history isn't as glorious as it's often portrayed.
And when he asks about modern nobles and how they got their titles.
He gets stories of corruption, betrayal, sycophancy. It paints a really bleak picture of contemporary society compared to even the flawed past. Reinforces Swift's critique.
And finally, in this part of the world, the Struldbrugs.
Ah, the immortals of Lugnag. This is a powerful one. They live forever, but they don't stay young. They just get older and more decrepit.
Gulliver initially thinks immortality sounds great, right?
He does. But then he sees the reality. After 30, they start declining. By 80, they're legally dead, lose all property, become forgetful, envious, miserable, just endlessly decaying.
That's a horrifying image.
It completely shatters the romantic idea of living forever. Swift uses them to argue that mortality, the natural end of life, might actually be necessary for life to have meaning and value. Seeing them cures Gulliver's keen appetite for perpetuity of life pretty fast.
A profound lesson on the potential horrors of what seems desirable.
Exactly. It deepens his disillusionment by showing the flaws even in seemingly utopian concepts like immortality.
So after all that, the tiny, the giant, the abstract, where can Swift possibly take Gulliver next?
To the place that arguably changes him the most profoundly. The land of the Houyhnhnms.
The rational horses.
The rational horses, yes. And living alongside them.
Mm.
The Yahoos.
Who are?
Brutish, savage, disgusting creatures who look disturbingly human. This contrast is the core of Swift's final, most savage satire.
And how does he even get there?
His own crew mutinies, greed, betrayal. The very human flaws that the voyage will explore lead him to this place. It sets the stage perfectly.
So he arrives, encounters the Yahoos first, is repulsed, and then meets the Houyhnhnms.
Right. The contrast is immediate and stark. The Houyhnhnms embody order, reason, cleanliness, virtue. The Yahoos are chaos, filth, vice.
But the Houyhnhnms initially confuse Gulliver with the Yahoos.
Because of his physical form, yes. It's his clothes, that artificial human covering, that makes them realize he's different. It highlights their focus on essential nature over appearance.
He learns their language eventually. What's it like?
Very logical, apparently. Focused on facts and necessities. They don't have words for things like lying, cheating, evil, opinion, because those concepts don't exist in their society, which is based entirely on reason.
When Gulliver describes human society to his master Houyhnhnm, it doesn't go well, does it?
Understatement. The master horse is particularly horrified by how humans treat horses in Europe, riding them, whipping them, and especially castration.
A complete reversal of perspective. The animal judging the master.
It forces a hard look at human cruelty and dominance, questioning its justification from a purely rational standpoint.
The master horse even critiques human anatomy, finds it poorly designed compared to a horse's.
Swift pushes the perspective shift to the absolute limit, seeing ourselves through the eyes of a completely different rational species, and it's not flattering.
And their approach to law and disputes.
Simple, rational, based on truth and equity. It serves as a direct contrast to the complexity, corruption, and self-interest Gulliver describes in human legal systems.
The master horse just can't comprehend lawyers or money.
Concepts like deliberately arguing falsehoods or valuing shiny metals are completely alien to him. They seem utterly irrational, which is Swift's point about human greed and materialism.
Their way of life seems almost utopian, simple diet, no disease.
It's presented as an ideal of rational living, free from human vices, though you have to wonder if it's a bit cold, emotionless.
They have views on war, lying, marriage, death, all based on reason.
And each view implicitly critiques the often irrational human approach to the same things.
Gulliver tries to explain English politics, how someone becomes a chief minister.
Through lies, betrayal, manipulation, pretending to be zealous for the public good while serving oneself. Yeah, it's a cynical masterclass in political corruption.
And the master horse's reaction.
Profound disappointment. He concludes that humans, yahoos, have been given a tiny bit of reason, but they only use it to worsen their natural vices, making them more cunning and destructive than simple animals. It's a devastating judgment.
The Yahoo's love for shiny stones, gold, and fighting over them.
A perfect, simple metaphor for human greed, lawsuits, and pointless conflict over material wealth.
Even the female Yahoos are depicted horribly.
Swift doesn't hold back in making the yahoos represent the absolute worst aspects of physical, instinctual, base human nature.
And Gulliver has to live among them for a while.
Under the watchful eye of a Houyhnhnm servant, yes. And then comes that awful moment.
The female Yahoo tries to embrace him.
Yes. And it confirms, horribly for Gulliver, his undeniable physical kinship with these creatures he finds so revolting. It's the ultimate humiliation, blurring that line between him and them.
We learn a bit about Houyhnhnm education strength, speed, hardiness, and how they use their hooves.
They're practical, physically capable, masters of their environment in a way that doesn't require complex or corrupting technology.
Eventually, he has to leave. The Houyhnhnms decide he's a danger, too much like a Yahoo, but with some reason.
It's logical from their perspective, but heartbreaking for Gulliver, who has come to idolize them.
He's rescued by a Portuguese ship, captained by a decent man, Pedro de Mendes. But Gulliver's reaction to being among humans again.
Total revulsion. He sees them all as yahoos. He can barely stand the sight or smell of them. The transformation is complete. He's utterly alienated.
He vows to only speak the truth, like the Houyhnhnms.
Yes, and he even critiques other travel writers, claiming his only motive is the public good. Loads of irony there, given his state of mind.
And that bit praising British colonialism.
Pure, dripping sarcasm, contrasting the noble claims with the likely reality of exploitation, especially after hearing the Houyhnhnm perspective on reason and justice.
So he finally gets home to Redriff. How's family life?
A disaster. He can't stand his wife and children, buys horses, and spends his time talking to them in the stable. He finds the company of English horses preferable to English humans, whom he sees as yahoos.
He still respects the idea of Houyhnhnms, though.
Oh, yes. He laments the brutality of the Houyhnhnms in England, meaning the horses, but his admiration for the rational ideal remains. He's just permanently broken by the comparison.
Okay, wrapping up this deep dive then. What are the big takeaways from looking at these parts of Gulliver's Travels?
Well, first and foremost, it's the absolutely relentless satire of human society, isn't it? Politics, science, law, pride, greed. Swift leaves almost nothing untouced.
And the power of perspective, how changing the scale, or the observer, completely alters our view of ourselves and our world. Lilliput, Brobdingnag, they force that constantly.
Exactly. Relativity is key. And then there's the deeply unsettling exploration of human nature itself, the potential for irrationality, corruption, and brutality embodied so starkly in the Yahoos.
Swift uses these fantastical settings, basically, to hold up a mirror to his own time, and maybe ours too.
Definitely. He's dissecting European, particularly British society, and finding it deeply flawed when measured against ideals of reason or even just basic decency sometimes.
What do you think worried Swift the most, based on these excerpts?
It feels like pride, hypocrisy, the abuse of reason for corrupt ends, and the disconnect between how societies claim to operate and how they actually do. Political corruption and the flaws in institutions seem like major targets.
And Gulliver's final state, that intense misanthropy, is it presented as the right conclusion? Or is it a sign he's gone too far, lost perspective himself?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Readers debate that endlessly. Is he tragically enlightened, seeing the terrible truth? Or has he become unbalanced, unable to see any good, blinded by an impossible ideal? Swift leaves it somewhat ambiguous.
So if people want to explore this further...
Definitely read the whole book.
Yeah.
And maybe explore Swift's other works, like A Modest Proposal, to get a fuller sense of his satirical power and his complex, often dark, view of humanity.
Okay, one final thought to leave everyone with. Thinking about the rational Houyhnhnms and the brutish Yahoos. In what ways did those extremes still resonate? Do we see aspects of both playing out in human behavior and society today?
That's a great question. Where do we see cold, detached reason versus base instinct or irrationality in our world? It's definitely something Swift's work prompts you to consider long after you finished reading.